morning to everyone. Now we start this morning on the line number 4. The oral instruction is to observe the mind at all times. So it's very important for us to recognize that basically we live in an ocean of thought. And it's rather like the fish in the ocean. They are always living within the ocean, so that they don't recognize the nature of water. It's just they take it for granted. I mean, of course, water is water. And in order to recognize the nature of the water, we have to be a little bit outside of the water to analyze it and see what is water. So likewise, in order to understand our thoughts, our emotions, our thinking, we need to develop that quality which is, as it were, standing back from the thoughts and feelings and observing, witnessing. In Buddhism, this is called mindfulness. And it's, again, as I say, it's the ability to step back from the thoughts. Normally, when we are thinking, we are swept along by the thoughts. We are the thoughts. And so when we are happy thoughts, then we feel happy. When there are sad thoughts, we feel sad. When they are violent thoughts, we feel violent. When they are peaceful thoughts, we feel peaceful. We're completely immersed in our thinking. All our memories, all our hopes, all our fears, all our fantasies and daydreams, our beliefs, our opinions, our ideas about others, about ourselves, everything is a thought. But what is a thought? Do we ever actually look at our thoughts? Where do thoughts come from? Where do they stay? Where do they go? Where are they? What is a thought? What does it feel like? Because as long as we are immersed in our thoughts and identified with our thoughts, we are going to be constantly like that ocean. The waves go up, the waves go down, the waves go up, the waves go down, endlessly. So it's not that we are trying not to think. Please don't misunderstand. Thoughts are not the enemy. It's natural to think. It's the genius of the human birth that our thoughts are so complex and deep. I mean, there's nothing wrong with thoughts. The problem is that we identify with the thoughts. And we think thoughts are real. I mean, people kill for their beliefs. They kill others, they kill themselves. So thoughts are very powerful because our thoughts direct our speech and our actions. I mean, all of our speech and action has an intention which comes before it. And that intention is thought. So, therefore, it's very important that we understand thoughts. What is a thought, which seems so solid, so real, so enduring, and yet lasts like this? I mean, it's constantly flowing. So it's very important to have the ability to step back and observe the thoughts, just as thoughts. And also to ask, who is thinking? And if we say, well, I am thinking, the ultimate question, who am I? Find this I that's so busy manufacturing thoughts. So it's a very important part of the spiritual life to really understand the nature of thoughts by experiencing them and recognizing that far from being solid and real and unchanging, they are momentary and like a bubble. Bubbles are very bright and shiny and look so solid and real, but click, they're empty. Likewise, when we look at the thoughts, they're like transparent, frames. They are not solid and real and enduring. We can reproduce them again and again and again, but it's a different thought each time. So it's very important to develop the ability to, as it were, step back and just observe the flow of the thoughts without identifying and without being swept along by the current. We are not trying to stop thoughts. We are trying to know thoughts. Right? Obvious. So traditionally, it is said that it's like someone sitting on the banks of the river, watching the river go by. Normally, we are swept along by that river. We are totally immersed in the river. Now, we are going to step back from the river and just observe it as a river. We're not banking up the river. We're not damming it. We're not trying to stop it. We're trying to know it. So in Buddhist meditation, at least, the first step is to quieten the mind and to get the mind to focus, to develop the attention, like on the breath or on a mantra, on anything. This is called shamatha, calming meditation. So this tames the mind, right? We dealt with yesterday. The mind becomes more quiet, more focused. Then what do we do with that quiet, focused mind? What we do is to take that searchlight of the attention, the one-pointed attention, and turn it back in on itself to look at the thought stream as it's going by. As the mind becomes more peaceful and more one-pointed, at the same time, the background noise of our chattering surface mind begins to quieten down a bit. Naturally, we don't try to quieten it down, we just ignore it. Now, instead of ignoring it, we're giving it our full attention. By looking at it, watching it, not interfering, not judging it, not doing anything with it, just observing it. And seeing how the mind actually works. And in the technique, sometimes people just take a thought and question it to death. Where does it come from? Where is it going to? What does it look like? What color is it? Where does it stay? Etc. But anyway, the point is to get the ability to step back and witness. This, of course, is not the ultimate nature of the mind. Even when we have very strong mindfulness and are able to observe the mind without interfering, that, of course, is not ultimate reality, because there's still a subject and object, right? The subject is now observing the object, which is the mind. I mean, the true nature of the mind goes beyond subject and object, but it's a conduit to that level of awareness, of unborn awareness. So here he's saying that we should observe the mind at all times. Well, we cannot observe the mind at all times if we cannot observe the mind at all. So therefore, the first is to learn how to observe the mind and how to, as I say, step back and just allow the mind to go on chattering away. It's like a television in some, go into people's houses and they have the television or the radio on the whole time and they're not listening to it, they're not watching it, but they've got the noise there. Somehow they find it comforting. And they're doing their own tasks, but in the background is all the noise. So this is like ordinary when we're doing shamatha meditation, looking at the breath or the mantra. The noise is going on in the background, the television is turned on, but we're not paying it attention. We're ignoring it because we're focused on some other task. But now we are watching the television, but we are not getting absorbed in what the television is saying. We're just looking at it. I mean, I think if one belongs to a culture, a way of life where one normally does not see television, then when one does watch television, it's depressing. So here we are just watching television to watch television, not to get absorbed in it's trying to draw our mind in. Our mind is not going to be drawn in. So this is the inner television of the mind we're talking about. That instead of getting fascinated by our thoughts, we just step back and watch them. And if one does that as a meditation, one soon discovers how unutterably boring the mind actually is. It keeps replaying the same old movies. You've got Casablanca how many times? And it's very uninnovative much of the time. The same, not that one again. All our soap operas come up. And, really, it's an education. Just to recognize what's going, oh, God, no, not that one. Oh. So it's very helpful just to really begin, not trying to stop it, not trying to encourage it, not getting judgmental, not getting caught up in its story. Just recognizing all these thoughts endlessly running through the mind. So in meditation, one can do that. One can just sit and observe the mind. Then, during the day, having learned how to watch the mind, develop that quality of awareness, of mindfulness, which gives us a space. If nothing else, it gives us a space from endlessly being tossed up and down on the waves of our thinking. Now the thoughts can keep going, but we are not the thoughts. There is this quality of observance, of knowing, which is behind the thoughts. It's not the thoughts anymore. It's a more subtle level of consciousness. It's not the nature of the mind, but it is leading backwards towards the nature of the mind. And already gives tremendous clarity to our thinking. Because now we are not immersed. It's like a boat on top of the waves. We're still connected with the waves going up and down, but now we're on a boat. We're not tossed up and down by the waves. One time there was this, I saw this T-shirt in Malaysia, and it had a surfboard. It had all these big waves and a surfboard. And on top of the surfboard was someone sitting in Padmasana, meditating. And the slogan said, "Riding the waves of life, be mindful, be peaceful." And it's like that. The waves are there. We go up and down, but if we're on a surfboard, that's fine. It's fun. Even big waves are more fun as we begin to get balanced. So to observe the mind at all times, as I say, depends on being able to observe the mind even for a moment. And so this is something which we cultivate in our practice. And then we need very much to take that ability into our daily lives. When I was first starting in my practice, our yogis at the monastery said to me that every hour, 3 times, you should look at the mind. So therefore, it only takes a few seconds, you know, whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. You don't have to suddenly go like this in the middle of the office. We just suddenly click in. It's like turning the light on. In this moment, what is my body doing? What is my mind doing? What thoughts are in my mind at this moment? Not changing them, not judging them, but knowing them. Because if we begin to do this, then gradually our ability to be conscious of being conscious, it extends. It becomes more often. We suddenly, something comes up and we click into being aware. And at the same time, our ability to stay aware begins to elongate. With longer and longer time, effortlessly we're able to be present. There's a Vietnamese master called Thich Nhat Hanh, and at his monastery they have what they call a mindfulness bell, which just goes ding. Nobody knows when. I mean, it's not, you know, like on the hour, but it goes ding, and then everybody brings themselves back into the moment. Non-judgmentally. It's very important not to be judgmental in this. Just what is happening at this moment. And gradually that builds up until it becomes effortless. Any quality to really become expert at it, it takes effort. We know this in sport, we know this in music, we know this in any area. At the beginning, it's not natural. We have to create the habit. But eventually, it becomes quite effortless. We are just present. And then we are eventually observing the mind at all times. We cannot just say, right, I'm going to observe the mind at all times. We can hardly observe the mind for a second. But we build up the strength. And then we are not the thoughts. One skillful way to do this is to keep a mantra, which is a fairly short mantra, and to keep it in your thoughts constantly. When I was before in England, before I came to India, so I must have been about 19, and I heard about the mantra on Mani Padme Hum, and so I asked the Lama, could I say this mantra? And he said, oh yes, of course. He was hardly likely to say no. So I didn't know. So I just kept saying it. But I was working in a library, and this was pre-hippie days. So you couldn't go around just muttering mantras. And so I was saying it in my mind constantly. I really made an effort to, whatever I was doing, have this Om Mani Padme Hum in my mind. And after about 3 days, not very long, it shifted from my mind, my brain, where it was going around constantly, and just went down into the center of the being, the heart chakra, and began to reverberate Om Mani Padme Hum of its own accord. And at the same time, my consciousness split, so that what we're saying, the thoughts and feelings were there, and then there was this space with Om Mani Padme Hum just echoing constantly, and then this awareness which was present there. And at the same time, of course, great compassion arose, because one recognized one's own predicament and the great pain that people are in, because we are so immersed in a belief in ourselves, our thinking, our feelings, our memories, our identity. This causes so much pain. And so any mantra, I mean a mantra especially which has a lineage, would work. As with the Jesus prayer, it's the same thing. That if we keep it going, at first we have to make the effort, but after a while the power of the mantra takes over and shifts. And then one is effortlessly present with the mind, but not immersed in the mind. The supreme remedy is to know that nothing has self-nature. So the word translated as self-nature here is the word svabhava. And so, according to Buddhist philosophy, our problem is that we reify everything. That is, we make everything into things. Something solid, enduring, and real from its own side. So this includes our sense of self, that we make ourselves something solid, enduring, unchanging, and me versus everything else out there which is not me. But we also do it with, of course, other people, and we do it with things. So without going into this in very great detail, I mean, in Tibetan Buddhism, you know, monks spend 20 years debating this sort of stuff. We've got 20 seconds. So, but the idea is that we, okay, I'll use my glasses. The idea is that we take something and we label it, and then it becomes a thing in itself. For example, these glasses here. If I ask you what is that, you will say they're glasses or they're spectacles. But if one says, well, where is the spectacles? Where is the glasses? Is it here? And you say, no, that's the lens. Well, what about this? No, that's the frame. Well, in the frame, which bit is it? No, that's the handle, and this is this. I mean, if we keep pulling it down, looking for the thing in itself, we cannot find it. everything comes together because of various causes and conditions. It's not anything self-existent from its own side. We can keep reducing it down. I mean, if we were getting into physics, we would reduce it down to its cells and the atoms and the neutrons and the protons and so forth, and keep going down until you come back to space and energy. But we never can find the thing which we can point out to say that is the spectacles. Spectacles is something which we posit on the basis of all these different factors coming together. But the thing in itself, we cannot find it. If we look, where is the essence of these glasses? We cannot find it. It just keeps reducing down and down. When I first went to my grammar school, which is not what you call a grammar school, my secondary school when I was 11, we, for the first time, started science. So I said to the physics teacher, funny, I thought, now I will know. So I said to the physics teacher, when we keep reducing everything down, what is the ultimate that we get to? And she said, protons and neutrons. And I thought, no. If you've got a proton or a neutron, you must be able to reduce that. If she had just said, space and energy, I would have gone, oh, great, and maybe become a physicist. But because she said protons and neutrons, I lost interest in physics. Because actually, if one keeps reducing down and down and down and down, what is the ultimate? And then everything comes about due to causes and conditions. Everything. You take everything, the floor, the wood, who planted the seeds, the ground, the earth, the water from the sky, the sunshine, the insects, the everything, all coming working together to produce a tree, which eventually, again, will be cut down. Cut down by who? Who was the people cutting it down? Who was their family? What was their relationships? Everything is interconnected. But our minds don't see that interconnection. We only see the thing, and then we solidify it and we make it something which exists from its own side. We're not saying that it doesn't exist at all. What we're saying is that we don't see how it really exists. And we make everything real and solid. And we don't recognize that everything arises due to causes and conditions and has no self-existent nature. Self-existent means that there's something in it which you can point out as the thing in itself. But when we analyze down and down and down and down to find the thing in itself, we never can find it because it can always be broken up into more things. So that's basically what it means, is that we project this whole reality which seems so real, so existent from its own side, not recognizing how much we ourselves input into what the senses receive. This is one of the interesting validations which is now coming from neuroscience, that what our senses actually receive is something quite vague. But the brain, being a supercomputer, immediately solidifies it and labels it. And then immediately decides whether it likes it or it doesn't like it. It happens so quickly that we think we're actually getting the validation from something out there, not realizing how much our mind is contributing. This is why His Holiness the Dalai Lama is so fascinated by science, and neuroscientists and quantum physics and so forth, because what they are discovering is validating the wisdom which has existed in India for thousands of years. And the scientists are amazed how these yogis could have known that without equipment. And of course, His Holiness is amazed at how these scientists could have known that without meditation. So this question of the non-self nature is a very important question, but we really have a lot to get through, so we can't go into it. But it's very important just at least to remember that things are not the way. It's like we are a projector. I mean, to use an analogy, which we should never push analogies too far, but if you think of like a cinema, then we go in there and there is this projection out there. And if it's a good movie, we are completely absorbed in it. If it's a comedy, we're laughing. If it's a tragedy, we're crying. If it's a drama, our hearts are beating. We completely are absorbed in that. But if we look backwards, what is actually happening is that back in the projector room, there is this very powerful light which is shining through all these little transparent frames which are moving so incredibly fast that as the light goes through those frames, it creates this huge panorama in front. So that is somewhat like the nature of the mind. The nature of the mind is luminous clarity and emptiness, meaning that you can't catch it. But it's also cognizant, it is conscious, it is total consciousness, total awareness. And that radiates through all these little thought moments, which are going incredibly fast and projecting this outside movie, which is fine, in which we're mostly playing a starring part, should be mentioned. As long as we see the movie and we enjoy it and then we leave, we recognize it is just a movie. We're okay. It's when we believe that the movie is real, that's when we suffer. So this is why it's very important not just to look at the screen, but sometimes to be conscious of the projector. Because if we come into contact with that projector, then we recognize this really is just a movie that we're projecting. And so first we need to go through those transparent frames to get back to the light. The supreme conduct is to be in disharmony with the world. That's a great line. So here you can understand that absolutely perfectly. Last time I was here, I remember we had a couple who were very expert in kirtan. And on Christmas Eve, we were all doing kirtan, and come midnight, was very rousing Hare Krishna going on. The whole energy of the place, everybody Hare Krishnaing like crazy. And then along at Atlantis were all the fireworks and everybody drinking themselves into oblivion. And one could see the contrast, hear it, not see it, hear the contrast between here in the ashram, everybody focused on the divine, and over there, down there, everybody focused on oblivion. So this is what it means to be in disharmony with society. Doesn't mean that we go out quarreling with everybody. It means that our basic motivation for our life is not in harmony with that of society, which I'm sure so many of you here know about, especially with your parents, who are aghast that their highly educated offspring have suddenly gone so weird. This is what it means to be in discord, in disharmony with the world. Because the world, the Buddha said that anyone who seriously is practicing dharma, dharma means the spiritual life, anyone seriously practicing dharma is like a fish swimming upstream when the rest of the shoal are swimming downstream. So it's a very lonely journey. And at the same time, it takes a lot of effort to go against the current, to swim upstream. Because it is such a lonely journey, therefore, community is very important. In Buddhism, it's the third refuge, the Sangha, the spiritual community. The Buddha very much praised good companionship. In fact, his attendant and cousin Anand one time said to the Buddha, "You know, I've been thinking about it, Bhagavan, and I think that spiritual community, companionship, is half the spiritual life." And the Buddha said, "No, Ananda, it's the whole of the spiritual life." This need for good companions, meaning people who share the same values, who it doesn't mean that they have to belong to the same particular religion, but it does mean, and we see it here, everybody comes from so many different spiritual traditions, but we are in harmony because we share the same values. And this is very important, and more important today than ever, when the world is so completely wanting to go in one direction, and we are trying to go in another direction. Especially with the question of ethics. Someone was mentioning yesterday that, you know, in business and in so many of these organizations, ethics doesn't even come into it. It's all about profits. There's no ethics. There's no idea of living in this world harmlessly, with discipline. That would be laughed at as weak, rather than seen as a great strength. But most important is our question, as I said yesterday, all beings want to be happy. Where we believe happiness lies. Basically, there are two opposing views. Well, they can come together, but it's hard. One is that happiness, secular happiness, depends on the pleasure principle. So, therefore, it means that the more our senses derive pleasure, the happier we will be. And along with that, the idea that the more we possess, the more I become real. I identify with my possessions. My car, my house, It always has to be bigger and more impressive so that people will admire, wow, what a fantastic car. That makes me somebody special. All these stretch cars you see over by the Atlantis. Somebody was saying, well, who would want a car like that? It's a good question. Somebody who is very insecure and needs to bolster themselves by their possessions. People envy the possessions. They think, therefore, you must be a special person to own that. And in that, they believe happiness will life. Only you can get enough and you can keep having... Basically, it's a matter of wanting to be happy and comfortable in samsara. But samsara, by its very nature, is not only impermanent, but very unsatisfactory. So it doesn't work. You look at these people on their yachts. Do they look happy? I mean, there you've got this multi-million yacht. So why aren't you blissed out? No, sir. Look at their faces. Mind you, they're overlooked by all the others who don't have yachts. But in that case, they should be feeling, oh, look, everybody's so full of envy of us. But they don't. They just look kind of bored. So the other kind of happiness is a happiness which comes from our inner spiritual direction. That sense that genuine happiness is something, an inner joy, which comes from within and really has very little to do with our external circumstances. It's something, that's why very rich people can be totally miserable. They could be happy. It's not to do with what you own. It's to do with your inner state of being. But also poor people can be very, very happy because they have an inner strength. And also the understanding that happiness also depends very much on making our prime motivation the happiness of others. So this again goes against the current. The idea is you've got to make yourself okay. You and yours, of course, your family. That's as far as it's going to go. But on the spiritual path, our loving kindness and compassion extends to all beings. You know, recently we had an influx of small nuns. I mean, I was quite shocked. I won't tell you how small the smallest is, but she wears a bib. But they've settled down very happily. They're fine. And the older nuns have taken them in very well, and they're very happy to look after them. But recently, one of them, she was probably about 7 or 8, somebody asked her, oh, now you're here, you can pray for your mother and all your family. And this little girl said, here we pray for all beings. So that's the point, that we are also concerned with all beings, not just those that we happen to be connected with and that we happen to love. Of course we care for them, but we care for all beings. And this also goes against what society tells us, which is to look out for number one. So this sense of not being in disharmony, as I say, in the sense of quarreling and arguing, but in the sense of really wishing happiness and feeling the pain of all beings, goes against the current. And because of that, because instead of getting angry and upset, we try to develop patience. Instead of trying to acquire more and more, we learn how to be more open, more generous, to share. this goes against the current. And as I say, therefore, because in the world, while you're here with each other, it's easier. But when you go back to your homes, to your jobs, then it is very important to nonetheless feel that support of good friends. Good friends means spiritual friends. People who share our values, who believe what we believe. As I say, it's not a matter of particularly of religious path, it's a matter of underlying good values. It's very important for us because we are living and thinking in discord with the world. The world says, go, you've got to go this way. And we're saying, no, we want to go this way. We're swimming upstream. And it helps to be in the company of a few others who are also swimming upstream. The supreme accomplishment is a continuous decrease of disturbing emotions. The word which they're using for accomplishment is actually the word siddhi. And those of you, of course, who know Sanskrit know that normally when we think of siddhis, we are thinking of sort of like almost magical powers. In the time of Atisha, Atisha died just when Milarepa was born, the great Tibetan yogi. And so in that time, there was a great admiration for siddhis, for special powers, clairvoyance, the ability to fly, the ability to walk through rocks, to manifest objects, and so forth. This was regarded as a very sign of advanced spiritual accomplishment. As today, certainly in India, anybody who has clairvoyance or can manifest gold bracelets from their hands, etc., is regarded as being somebody very spiritually advanced. And this is a big danger because, of course, merely having psychic abilities is no indication really of spiritual advancement. Some real rogues have nonetheless been highly clairvoyant, and some great saints have had no powers at all. It's not, and this is why the Buddha himself forbade that even if one developed psychic powers, that one displayed them. There's a story of some village, there was a big pole, and at the top of the pole was some kind of prize. And anybody who could go up the pole and get that prize would get the prize. It was some bowl containing something. And so one monk who had the siddhi of levitation, he levitated up and took it. And when the Buddha heard about this, I mean, he practically threw him out of the Sangha and made a rule that one must never show one's psychic powers. So, because it not only fools others, but it fools oneself, unless they are used very skillfully for a real purpose, not just to impress others. So, therefore, Atisha is very cleverly taking this word, which most people think of as psychic powers, and saying the real sign of your accomplishment, of your siddhi, is the continuous decrease of disturbing emotions. So disturbing emotions means our greed, are anger, jealousy, pride, anything which is negative and disturbs the mind. When we are angry, our mind is not peaceful. When we are jealous, our mind is not peaceful. When we are greedy and longing for something, to grasp at something and hold on to it, our mind is not peaceful. So therefore, these are called the klesha. Klesha means something which afflicts us, which pains us. Like the hot sun in a desert. That would be a klesh. And so as we begin to see that somebody does something to annoy us, and we don't get disturbed. We think, wonderful, we will deal with this later, again, these qualities. But this quality of, somebody does something to upset us and annoy us, says something bad or does something obstructive, instead of getting all upset, we spontaneously feel patient and recognize that they are helping us on the path to develop the qualities of patience. We don't get upset. Or we see something very desirable and we don't reach out, even in our mind, to possess it. We think, well, actually, I have more than enough and it will just be a trouble to have that. I don't need it. Somebody gets something that we have wanted so much, maybe promotion or some other material gain or another person that we desired, and they get them. Instead of being all upset and jealous and envious and you're disturbed in the mind, we say, well, that's wonderful. Now how happy they must be. Good for them. I mean, if we did that in sport, imagine. You're in football and one team wins. Obviously, one team is going to win, one team is going to lose. So then one team wins and everybody's happy, and the other loses, and they're also happy for the other side. Isn't it? That ability to rejoice in the happiness of others. It's a very important quality. So therefore Atisha says, even if you're in retreat for a year, when you come out of retreat, the question you ask yourself is not, what great visions you had, what great spiritual experiences and insights. The question you ask is, are your disturbing emotions more, the same, or less? And if you're even more disturbed by other people, you've been peaceful and in retreat, and now you come out and everyone's so noisy and inconsiderate, and we all get so upset. Or if it's just the same, actually, nothing much has changed, then he says that retreat was a waste of time. The only sign of success is if our disturbing emotions have grown less. Then we can think that retreat was worthwhile.
Chanjo senjo rimbo che ma che panan che jo che wan yam pa me pa yang go ne kwang du pe wai shu.
Thank you.